Thank you for coming to the mediation. I'm David Plant. I'm your mediator. On my right are Sarah and Mike. Is that right? Should we use first names? Is that all right with you on the Singapore side?
Yes.
All right, good. And Sarah, you represent whom?
I am I'm representing Investmas.
All right, and you're the lawyer.
I am the attorney, yes.
And Mike, you are whom?
I am Marshall Phelps.
All right, thank you. And on the Singapore side?
My name is Marcus.
Yes.
I'm the counsel for Professor Schurtz.
For just Schurtz? What about IIATR?
Yes, also for I.
Also, all right.
And I'm Professor Schurtz.
Very good. Thank you. And are we to introduce the judges? I don't normally introduce judges when I'm mediating. All right, we'll start then. Thank you for coming. As you know, this is mediation. It's not a judicial proceeding. I understand that there have been some new developments, and I understand also that litigation has been indicated somehow. I don't know whether there is a proceeding in place now or not. But that's a bit different from where you were in your prior negotiations, I believe. And that leads to perhaps a different look at, quote, confidentiality. I hope we can agree that no matter what is said or what is done by a speaker or an actor here, that it will not be used against that person in the event you must litigate and we fail here. Is that agreeable?
Yes.
And that's subject to whatever the legal provisions are of the jurisdiction in which you may find yourself. And I can't recount all those for you. In the case of private caucuses, if you want to chat with me, I'll be glad to do that. Anything you tell me, I keep to myself unless you give me express permission to tell the other side. Is that okay?
Yes.
And I have some notes. I marked up some of your papers here. I throw everything away after this mediation is over. I don't keep anything. Now, confidentiality goes also to any information you have that you may regard from a business standpoint or a personal standpoint as sensitive. And please, in this atmosphere, or this umbrella of confidentiality under which we're working, please try to be free and open and candid about any kind of information, including that which you might think is sensitive. Can we try to do that? I think it will move the ball much further and much more rapidly further if we can try to do that. I know it may be difficult. I understand there are some legal as well as business issues here. I am not sure we'll make a lot of progress if we focus only on the legal issues. My experience suggests that we should try to focus on the business issues, and moreover, focus on each side's, on each person's, as a matter of fact, real interests and real needs. They may be business, they may be financial, they may be personal, they may be emotional, whatever they may be. Let's try to focus on interests and needs, and positions we can leave for another day. I think it would be a good idea to try to listen as carefully and empathetically as you can to what another person says. You may not agree, but it may be valid from that person's standpoint. You can try to stand in the other person's shoes, if you can, and try to understand what is driving them to say whatever they're saying or doing whatever they're doing. Does that make sense? Could you try to do that?
Yes.
If we can do that, then I think we have a better chance of bringing everyone together at the end of this session. We can try, it seems to me, to help the other side come to your side of the table. Try to persuade them that it's in their interest to satisfy your interests. That does not mean you have to give up on your interests and needs. It does mean, though, that we have to find a creative solution, if we can, that will satisfy both sides' interests and needs. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Good. I'm here committed to spend the next hour and a half focusing only on your issues, your needs. I will try to be as creative as I can to facilitate your discussions. And I hope I can have the same commitment from everybody, the two people on each side, that you too will work as hard as you can and as creatively as you can to find a solution to your problem. May I have that commitment? And can you make it to each other? All right, good. Now, it's your process, as you know. It's whatever the problem is yours. This is an opportunity for you to take control of the process, of your attempts to find a solution, take control of creating the solution, and not leave it to someone else to decide your business or your personal fate for you. So it's a great opportunity for you to move forward, sharing as much information as you can, as much information about your interests and needs with each other as you can. Now, someone has to start. I don't care who does. I don't know whether you've talked it over beforehand or not. But whoever does, could we start, perhaps if there's some new information you think ought to be shared, fine, but rehearsing what's happened in the past may not advance us as much as looking forward and commencing our discussion, if we can, with new information and then a discussion of interests and needs. Does this make sense? Is that okay with you? All right. Who wants to say something?
I can start. That's
all right. That's fine.
First of all, thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you for your time. Professor Schertz, I appreciate your time here. I appreciate you coming here as well as counsel. We're encouraged to be in the mediation process. We know that litigation and arbitration is a very time-consuming and expensive process. If we do go to the next step in our ADR agreement that's in our contract, which is arbitration, that's going to get very complex and can also be incredibly expensive. So I'm hoping that we can find a way to reach an agreement. I also want to put out right away that we have a relationship built on trust, honesty, and openness. There's some new things that have come up that make this a situation in which we need to sit down and talk about. Your Aquafinder software has been incredibly helpful for our business. It's been incredibly helpful for our mining, for locating water. And with the new updates that you've been able to do, we noticed two sources. We noticed a moving source and a non-moving source. That non-moving source has been identified as oil. As you know, we are not an oil company, but we are a mining company. And there's a considerable value to that, to us. What we're hoping is that today we can find a way in which we can work out an agreement for us to take control of that oil. But with that, we know that there's going to be something that we have to share, and because we have a partnership. There's going to be a way that we can come together and our interests can align. We're open today to talk about that. We're open to creative solutions, and we hope that we can come to that. We've been to mediation twice before. We've come out with 2 agreements. Now, there's been minor snags along the way, but I think that we can move past that. And this may be a great start for something else. I do want to let my attorney speak, but I also want to be sure that we don't get bogged down in the legal aspects, because this is a very, very legal problem. It has a very strong legal impact. And the only thing that's going to do is lead us to litigation and lead us to arbitration. That's not going to lead to a resolution here. So I hope that we can, I understand that we need to touch on that. I understand that's part of the contract. However, I hope that when we address that, we can move forward. So I'd really appreciate my attorney to speak from now.
Absolutely. Thank you, Marshall. I do want to reiterate that it was only through the use of Aquafinder that we were able to find this oil, and it came as a complete surprise to our company that was actually what we found in that location. I want to, again, thank you guys for being here today at this mediation. And I want to get into a little bit of the legal aspects, but I don't want to go into detail on them because I think it just sets up the framework of what we do need to get out of today. And so for your help and yours as well, I just want to discuss the 3 issues that I think we need to talk about from our standpoint. And the first is the further use of Aquafinder. As you know, it finding oil is not what it was intended to do, of course, and we understand that. But we need to discuss the further usage of it. Second, we need to discuss the actual copyright assignment agreement that was signed, as we understand it, that we feel there is a copyright there, and as I understand from the situation, you may not feel the same way. So I think we need to talk about that a little bit. Also, we need to talk about the patent agreement that we currently have and how that's going to play out throughout this process. And I think that's really it from our side, and we're really hoping to hear a lot from your side as to how you're feeling about what has happened already and where we're going to go from here.
All right. Would you like to respond?
Yes, we would. Thank you, David. Thank you, Marshall. Thank you, Sarah, for your opening statement. Well, first, we'd like to begin by thanking you for your generosity in offering to reimburse us for the travel fees as well as for the mediation costs. We think that is a very good start to your willingness to talk and settle our differences and our disagreements without having to proceed to litigation. And on that, I'm very glad to hear Marshall mention how litigation is actually the last thing on your mind. You recognize that it is not the most conducive way to settle our disagreement, and that it's costly, and that there might be other ways in which we can reach an understanding. And we also feel exactly the same way. And so we hope that even though Sarah has raised three somewhat legal issues, we hope that they don't turn into a comparison of legal positions and legal arguments, because I think Marshall's already mentioned that this would probably get us not very far. And as David has already mentioned, we should be forward-looking in our as an overarching approach to our agenda today. What we really feel is beneficial in coming here to talk about these problems is that we think we can add value to our relationship if we can build back the trust, the openness, and the honesty in the same way that Marshall has already mentioned in his opening speech. If we can build these elements back up, we think that we can add more value to the relationship. Now, I think it's quite clear that as far as Jeanne and myself are concerned, we are part of the Green Party in Germany. And environmental concerns are very important to us. Nonetheless, we see the practical side of things. You mentioned that you have found oil using our system. And oil, as everyone knows, isn't likely to be beneficial for the environment. As a fossil fuel, it pollutes, and carbon emissions are a perennial issue, even more so now with global warming. Despite that, we see the practical side of things, and we're willing to discuss how, if oil is an important concern to you, even though I didn't hear that mentioned by Marshall or Sarah, if that is a concern to you, we'd just like to say from the very beginning that we're willing to discuss how we can maximize the benefit to the environment. I know it sounds a bit different or difficult to say that oil and benefit to the environment can be put in the same sentence, but we think it can. Because oil is also black gold, and oil can bring money. And what we'd like to see is to share that money in promoting the environment.
I'm coming here today with a lot of unhappiness. I think it stems from two things. First of all, as you have acknowledged, my SDAAS is the one that has found the oil, and it has the capability of finding the fossil fuel, the very thing that I have been lobbying against my whole life. So this has resulted in my reputation being in tatters right now. My colleagues and my friends, they are laughing at me, they are scorning at me, they're saying that I have sold out. So oil is something, and I think, Marshall, you mentioned that you want to get the oil. And I hope that you can appreciate that it is very difficult for me to even agree to having you extract the oil. But I've spoken to Marcus, and as he has mentioned, we have to be practical. the reality is that the oil is there, and I think I am prepared to talk about how we can deal with the oil if you can address my concerns and if you can reassure me that my concerns will not be forgotten. What I think our relationship needs is a rebuilding of trust. In our previous negotiation, there was a promise made that the shanty towns in Tanzania would be taken care of. I have not seen progress on this to date, and this is really a cause of my unhappiness and my concern today. So I think what I really need, first of all, is a rebuilding of the trust, and I hope that you can address my concern in terms of the living conditions of the people in Tanzania. I think this will be a good basis for us to work and to continue discussing. The second concern is in relation to the oil. I am ready, and I can see that we have to talk about how we can use the oil, and my concern here is that it must be used in a way that maximizes the benefit to the environment. And I think I would like to hear more of your concerns, and I think as David mentioned, if the both of us can meet our concerns, we can reach a positive outcome today.
All right, thank you.
I want to thank you for sharing your perspective on things, and I understand that rebuilding that trust is going to be very important to moving forward, as I heard from you. I was wondering if you wouldn't mind if we put a list on the board of the issues we really do need to discuss today so we can maximize our time here. I know some of the legal issues might end up falling toward the bottom, and I expected that today. I just needed to make sure those were said. But we do want to make sure we address all of everyone's issues. So if we could have you maybe write up some issues on the board for us.
All right, my handwriting is illegible, so this may
I'm far
frustrate the
away,
whole
so-
experience, but we'll try. Yes.
I think the first thing that you mentioned was the oil, what to do with the oil. I mean, we will talk about trust before we get to these things. And
Sorry, are we putting interests? Are we putting issues?
The
up on the
issues we
board?
need to
the
discuss.
issues, yes.
Okay, then.
Yeah.
All right, and
The-
I
what do you
think
want
the
to say?
issue
Oil?
would be the
Yes.
oil.
All right.
I think one of the issues I would like to talk about is the situation in Tanzania, the living conditions in Tanzania. Okay. Also, the environment is a big issue for me.
I'll tell you what, I will tell you what the problem is. I have a tremor that has, I'm perfectly healthy, but it's an inherited, and it causes ripples everywhere. And so if someone else would rather write, that's fine, but I'll be
Yes.
glad to.
Actually, I could write it. I
All
think
right,
it's
thanks.
perfectly fine.
And it has, I'm perfectly relaxed and happy, but when the adrenaline flows, it just gets, well, anyway, you have three up there now: oil, Tanzania, and environment.
And I think we would like to talk about the use of the Aquafinder software, future use of the software.
And you mentioned the copyrights and the patents.
And I think the legal issues will kind of be covered within those. So, and if we can,
So would you rather talk about it all as one legal issue, or
I think setting them up as the four issues that we have there is a nice way to start. So
this is one, and
I think that will include the issue of the patent and the...
so this includes the issue of the patent?
correct.
Okay.
Do you want to make it clear and just put number 5, legal issues, so we don't forget?
Sure.
Okay.
But as we had talked about, the separating between business and legal issues, if we can come to an agreement on the business issues, there won't be legal issues. So hopefully we can.
That is
we
true.
won't have to get to 5.
That's very good to hear.
Now, what do you want to do about this? You have 5 issues.
Well, I think
Maybe you could talk about the priority, because even though we have numbered it 1 to 5, which one we should begin with?
you identified right away that there was a lack of trust, and that stemmed from the environment in Tanzania.
Yes,
Let's say
the
Tanzania.
living conditions in
Correct.
Tanzania.
Could you explain to me a little bit about what you felt there, what you saw there, and where we can make it better.
Can we put that, well, are you okay with putting that as the first thing to talk about?
Okay. Yeah, because if we're going to discuss about it, then I might have to go back to my seat.
Absolutely.
So this is number 1.
And then I think with the oil, we can discuss the environment as well.
Yeah, I think the oil would come first, and then once we figure out what happens with the oil, we can talk about how
The
we can benefit the environment. So oil 2, environment 3, future use of
then
Aquafunder 4 or
5.
5.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. So that would be the agenda? Okay.
Okay, so how about Tanzania? You have an issue with the living conditions.
I think in our previous negotiation, you promised me that you would take care of the people in Tanzania. I hope you recall my first visit there.
Absolutely.
When I was shocked
Absolutely.
at what I saw.
And I'm sorry for that.
Yes, the children were running around. There was no sanitation. There were people, it looked like there was prostitution, that AIDS was being spread. It was very shocking to me. And I expressed that to you in our previous mediation. And I thought that I had a promise from you that you would do something about it. I have not seen anything being done. And for me, that shows a lack of commitment to our relationship on your part.
I'm sorry you haven't seen that. What follow-up have you done to see if work has been done?
I had one of my Greenpeace people visit the site. We'll just go down to Tanzania, and he told me that there was, the situation was as I described to him. So I don't want to focus on what has happened, and I hope that this is an opportunity for us to build trust. I'm looking for a commitment to this as you had given me in the previous mediation.
I'm sorry if you don't feel that there was a commitment. We committed to you that there would be work done in Tanzania, and we're making efforts to do that. But we can't turn it over in a day, unfortunately.
Could you tell me more on what has been done since my first visit?
I haven't had I guess I haven't been in control of the project specifically with upgrading Tanzania, so I don't have the specifics as to what's been done. But we are firm in our word and our commitment to improving the conditions there. I also think the increase of funds coming from the oil would help significantly, and would probably lead towards a way to, something that could go back to Tanzania from that revenue as well, as it should.
How is your mining operation right now? Because when I went there, I believe the site was not set up yet. I think you were in the preliminary stages of setting up. So are you well established there, or is it still in the process of being set up?
It's still in the early stages. Not a whole lot of time has passed. Once again, we can't just make a city grow in a day. So,
Right. So would it be fair to say that the foundations and the infrastructure have already been laid, or are we still at the initial excavation stage where basically all that's there is a ring fence around the perimeter?
well, there's a significant amount of planning that goes into every mining project. And it's important that we do plan so that we don't harm the environment, so that we don't cause issues, and so that we don't hurt the people that are in the mines. So there's an incredible amount of planning, and not enough time has passed for us to get deep into the mine.
It sounds like you might have a concern about the equipment that's there, what's already been going on. Are you?
No, I can explain, and I'm actually very happy to hear that there is a lot of planning being done. I think what I'm hoping now is actually if you could bring my concerns into the planning. And I'm not sure if you've already planned for the people in Tanzania and improving that. So
what we're really looking at is if you could incorporate your plans for the Tanzanian people into your mining plans. Maybe if I could explain or illustrate what we mean by this, because from what we know of some mining companies who are committed to helping the community that they work with, usually what they do is, as they are setting up their mining project, or what other kind of project, as they set up the infrastructure, they take into account in what possible ways they could help the people in terms of their living standards. For example, electricity, wells, security, medical. These things would already have been built by the company for their own employees to begin with. So as a gesture of goodwill and interest in the community, what most companies do is that they incorporate the needs of the community into their infrastructure. And I think what Jeanne was really thinking of is, you don't have to go into the specifics, but it would be really good if we could hear how you are incorporating some of these help into the planning. I hope that gives you a better understanding of where or what we're looking at.
Well, there are considerable things that go into the building of a mining city. Obviously, you have the infrastructure stuff that you talk about. You have buildings, you have housing, you have plumbing, you have... Specifically what we're doing is we're also going to be making arid land farmable, which is going to be helpful in the future. Because with the water pipelines that will be running to the mine, it will actually provide nourishment to the soil, making it land that can be farmed. That makes it more profitable. I want to apologize, and I understand your frustration. I know this was a very important part last time we met, but I want to assure you that we are focused on making Tanzania a positive place. As you know, we adopted the OECD guidelines, and we are making every effort to follow those. So I want you to be aware that we are going to act in a way that's positive for the environment. We were well aware that in our initial agreement and our second agreement, we needed our interests to be aligned. Now, I know you have a strong environmental background. I know that you have been pushing for a lot of environmental friendly aspects, and we're willing to do that because we think it's in the best interest of humanity as well as our company.
Marshall and David, I hope, I need you to understand that I do believe what you're saying, and I do believe that you want to make the life of the people in Tanzania better. But those were the same words that you said to me in the previous negotiation. And that was a promise that was made to me in the previous discussion. I think what I do need, and I hope it's something that you can address, is for some real assurance that things will be done. And you mentioned the OECD guidelines. I have spoken to people about it, and they have given me some idea of where your company can go in terms of making life for people there better. And would you be happy to hear some of the things that I would like? I think there was the issue of the bribe, and while I do understand your position that it wasn't something that your company did, I think it would reassure me if we could have full transparency on all payments made to the Tanzanian government and to all the officials there. I've got five things on my list. So the second thing is that I hope in your plans for building your mining site, you can also incorporate plans for the infrastructure and for just making a small town for the residents there. And I think you mentioned that.
Absolutely.
The third thing that I hope for is that you could provide medical services. And what I'm looking at, again, is the danger of the spread of diseases like AIDS. That was something I saw the danger of there. So I'm hoping you can provide some basic medical services, or at least the funding for something like that to happen. The fourth thing that I'm looking at is policemen and security in the area. I think this is something that you are interested in as well. For your mining site, for your employees there, that there is a sense of security and safety. So we could look into training a small police force just for security, and also to deal with perhaps drug abuse, substance abuse, which I think is a problem there. Now, the last thing that I hope you can do also is to provide jobs and to provide basic education for the children.
I would like to, I have a question. I appreciate you looking into that. I think that really gives us some concrete things to work with. But we aren't a government. We're a mining company. Is there a way that, were you able to come up with a reason or a cost or an estimation of what this would take to implement?
Well, we do have some idea. As I mentioned earlier, these are things that are already the standard practice for many other corporations when they go into less developed countries. So we do have some idea of what kind of model we could adopt. we have heard of this mining company that operates in Brazil called Valve. And to date, a lot of their projects have been quite successful for the community. We didn't bring them with us here today, obviously, because we felt that it would be better to talk about it at a later meeting. But what I'm getting from you so far is that, in principle, this seems like a very good idea that Investments is keen to commit to. But it seems like really now it's just the details in terms of the funding, the costs that you're concerned about. Am I correct to say that?
I think right now it's a great idea in theory, but it is the realistic part of it. How realistic is it for a mining company to take over all of these aspects? It's fairly unrealistic to ask a mining company to do all of these things. And in that case, how do we go about figuring out how to make this happen? And that's really where it comes down to on that.
Now, Sarah, you are. I understand why you would say something like that, because perhaps, like I said, we don't have the information that we saw, all right? And you probably haven't seen that yet, but we think it's quite realistic given that a company is actually doing those things right now.
And if I can make that clearer, I told you that all these concerns directly relating to the conditions in Tanzania, these are things that I think the OECD guidelines, while they do not expressly provide for it, they do encourage companies to do this. So they're not things that I'm demanding from being unreasonable, but it's really coming from the OECD guidelines, looking at the spirit of what these guidelines stand for.
I guess I have a little bit of a concern that I feel like you're basing the opinion on what's going on in Tanzania off of something that someone told you who wasn't there before. And I guess it's hard because if you had gone back and said, oh, things haven't changed, I could understand that. We are making efforts to make things better. I'm sorry that your friend from Greenpeace wasn't able to see that. The other thing is we do have a commitment to making things better, and it's encouraging that other companies have done this. But you said trust is the #1 thing, and trust is the most important to you. I want to make sure before that I give you any assurance, and before that I tell you that we can and we will do something, that we can and will be able to do it. I think that's the first step that we need to be able to take. And without seeing the exact figures, I can't tell you with 100% certainty that we can do it. So I don't feel comfortable saying yes or no.
Okay, so I know you're not comfortable with it right now, but what I'm hearing still is that you think the idea is a good one. You'd like to help the community. You have already mentioned, I believe, how you would like to make the arid land farmable, and that's already passed your cost threshold, and we're very happy to hear that. So, am I right to say that in terms of the suggestions that we're making to incorporate a bit of the infrastructure for the community, so the needs of the community into the infrastructure they'll be building anyway, that's also good in principle for you, but that's contingent on you looking at more details on the costs, and also other information from the people on the ground from your side. Am I right to say that? Of
course you are. And in principle, we agreed to this in prior agreements already. So I think we've always been committed to the OECD guidelines, and we always are trying to move those forward. And what I'm hearing is that you'd like us to move forward at a faster pace or at a different pace than what is already occurring.
Well, I think, Marshall, you raised a great point that I wasn't the one there to see what was happening, and maybe my friend made a wrong judgment call. But I do hear that you are in the planning stages, and what I hope you can incorporate are these additional steps, these additional 5 things in your planning and in setting up your site there. I think Marcus has also addressed that you do have a cost concern, and without having to push you, I need more than just an assurance that if the costs are fine, that you'll be able to do it. And
because if the costs, your concerns are met, if later we're talking about the oil, and your other monetary concerns, if those are met, then we can talk about incorporating some of these infrastructural changes in your planning phases.
No, I think what I mean is that the trust there is an issue with trust. I have to be open about that. Again, I say the promise was made, and from what I've known, again, I don't want to make assertions, but I need that assurance that you will do it, and that it's not just a yes, but I'm hoping we can have something where if works are not done, can you give me something something like a default? What will happen if there's a default?
I'm sorry, because you see, I forgot that this has been quite difficult for Jeanne. While it's easy for us who especially for the lawyers who aren't involved in this transaction, Jeanne has gone through quite a lot. She's already been to 2 mediation sessions, and trust was always an issue in both those sessions. So she's right in pointing out that perhaps if we could right now talk about how we can have more transparency and accountability in the assurances that we give to each other, that would be very helpful for her.
I mean, you seem very hurt. Is there more to it than the Tanzania and the mediations? It seems like there's some real deep tension there. I want to try to alleviate that and be as transparent as possible.
Well, I think, and I hope you understand that I do have concerns about the environment, and I do have concerns about human rights. And when I went there and I saw the conditions, I was mortified. It was shocking, and I couldn't believe it. And I thought I had the assurance from you that things would change. Again, I would have to see it for myself, but I think what I can move on from here and what I need to move on is a greater assurance. Now, I have a suggestion, and that is to have an independent person, someone from an NGO, someone that both of us can trust, to just go into the site, to make sure that these guidelines, the OECD guidelines, and these 5 concerns are being addressed. So that's something concrete that would really help me to move on. Is there something?
Would that work for you?
Absolutely. Our company has made a commitment to the OECD guidelines, and we will make efforts to do that. If you are a major business partner of ours and have contributed a significant amount to our business and in helping us work, so we're willing to do that. There's no problem with that. If that helps alleviate the trust, are there other things we can do to make it okay?
Well, I think, so are we in agreement that we can have someone we can agree on, an NGO, to come in and just give us reports, give me reports that you are making these plans, that you are putting these in place. Are we in agreement?
I believe it sounds like we agree that someone
Okay.
could come in and do that.
Thank
and
you.
I think as you as an expert may be able to agree on that person or pick that person even without our assistance, since you are the one who understands more of the guidelines and more where you want to be with that.
Thank you so
you.
much.
Yeah.
And I think it would be good before we move to the next agenda that we are clear on where we are right now. And I think it would be best if I maybe ask David to see if you could try and summarize what we have done so far.
All right. Yes, I'll be glad to. It occurs to me that this trust issue is deep-seated and very important, and I understand that there are 5 concerns that Jeanne wants to deal with. Transparency with regard to payments to the Tanzanian government, building some infrastructure so a town results that's a viable community, medical services, security, training police, and also taking care of such problems as drug issues, and then providing jobs and educating children. I'm wondering if you could agree that before this mediation is over, or before you take other steps, you will get together sometime and perhaps reduce to writing and broad outline, a memorandum of understanding that this can be or can be done. Now, the expert may have to be involved. The expert may set targets, guidelines, and each of you will have to agree to that. It also occurs to me that if you agree to having the expert perform this exercise, there ought to be a kind of a terms of reference, a description of what the expert is supposed to look at and the kind of report the expert is supposed to render. Does that make sense? Can you agree to that?
Yes, I think we can.
All right,
that would
good.
be both parties.
I think that would make the expectations on the expert reasonable in our situation rather than just reasonable under the Greenpeace ideology.
It has to be realistic as well as...
Absolutely.
And if you both participate in the preparation of these guidelines for the expert, then you will both own the situation and you will then perhaps be more willing and more able, regardless of how the chips fall on the expert's report, to accept that report and go forward. Now, it also occurred to me, if that sums up where we are there, that might be useful. It occurs to me that money is the big gorilla in the room right now, as long as with the environment. And I'm wondering if this black gold can somehow be used to fund this kind of work, the experts' fees, building infrastructure, and so on.
And thank you, David, for that very concise summary. But perhaps we could also just add that what we also agreed to is to have an NGO which we both select. We mutually agree on an NGO who will be involved in doing reports. Is that what you're
someone that
looking
I
at?
would suggest, and I hope someone that you would agree on. And I would like to say that thank you for agreeing to these. It really reassures me. And as David mentioned, I think it really makes it easier to talk about how we can go into oil, the black gold, and maybe at the end look at how money can play a part in all our plans.
I want to clarify one thing, though, because from my understanding, the NGO would take care of the OECD guidelines, correct? Would they also be in charge of the, would they look at the 5 things that you had suggested, the police, the jobs and education, the medical infrastructure, and transparency and payment? Is that kind of how you had envisioned it and we just didn't?
What I'm looking at is for someone to be there, someone that both of us can trust, and to just work with you. Not to be in your way, but to just work with you and just report, perhaps, on the progress that you are making, and for me to have and see that these things are being put into place.
And since this is a body that you would also be involved in the selection process, it will probably also quell your fears over the reports that she receives on the ground, since you mentioned that the reports she received may not be as accurate as you'd like them to be. Right. So this will also help towards building trust between both parties.
I know that you had earlier had an interest in the having those 5 things into our plans and into our planning process. And it may help, it may serve both of our interests if we are able to follow this agreement, because we don't want to end up back here. We don't want to end up in an arbitration. We don't want to end up in litigation. And maybe it would set up if we allow the NGO to also work with these 5 in the implementation of the plan, once they get familiar with the area, to see exactly how they can do that. Would that be okay with you?
I think we would have to talk about when we select the person and select the NGO. We could talk about a little bit more about the role. We could sign a memorandum of understanding.
But that's a good idea. Yeah.
I think you have an issue here as to what the respective roles of the expert on the one hand and the NGO on the other hand may be. And I sense that can be resolved as you work out the guidelines for each. And perhaps they will merge, perhaps the 2 will go separate ways, who knows. But this will require some further work. I suggest that we look at it that way, if that's acceptable to you, and understand that. Is that okay? And then should we go on to other issues, or do you want to start working on this particular one?
I think having agreed in principle, we might be better off just moving on, and once we get past all the big issues, we can come back to the details.
Thank you for the reassurance.
Oh,
Now, do we want to go to oil? That was number 2 on the agenda, as I understand it.
Yeah.
What do we want to do about that?
I'd just like to kind of tell you a little bit from our position, and then turn it over to you, because you are the expert in this. As you said, there's a large amount of black gold, as you coined it, underneath where we have access. And I'm excited that you realize that it may be in the best interest of everyone to take that out. But we don't know the best way to do that. We have questions for you in ways that we can be beneficial to the environment. This information is out there. People are aware, have the potential to be aware that this oil is there. And we want to make sure that we do it in a way that satisfies your concerns and that works with your beliefs. I know you mentioned your reputation a long time ago, and that you you were people were mocking you because of your invention. However, this is an opportunity for great things to come and actually to serve your mission. If we are able to come up with how we can protect the environment, your software could actually be the thing that provides funding for it. I know a lot of nonprofits run into problems because they don't have money to do the projects that they need to. And there's no doubt that your organization as well as yourself have made great contributions in the industry. So how can we get the oil out without doing as little damage to the oil? And what do you need so that we can do this?
I'm sorry. So would you be asking us whether how we could extract the oil?
Correct.
Because that isn't Professor Schutz's area of expertise, and I think it's not yours as well. So to that question, I think quite simply, we won't be able to answer you on that question.
I think the reason we asked it, if I may, is because we're concerned about the environment. As you know, we've talked about our commitment to the OECD guidelines. And as an expert in Greenpeace, or working with Greenpeace, we're wondering if maybe you know of someone who could help us ensure that we are doing this in the most environmentally friendly way that we can.
I'm very glad to hear that you're ready to address my environmental concerns. I think you heard that the issue of oil is something that is very, very difficult for me. You mentioned that it was in our interest to get to the oil, and I have to clarify that it is not in my interest to get the oil. But I have spoken to Marcus, and we have agreed that we cannot run away from this situation. And I am trying to be brave in talking about how we can deal with it and in trying to maximize the benefit to the environment. Because I understand that this oil is going to be used as a fossil fuel, it's going to be burnt, carbon is going to be emitted into the air. There is definitely a detriment to the environment, but I'm glad to hear that we are ready to do as much good as we can. Marcus said that we are not experts in extracting oil. I think what the common interest here is that we want to do it in a way that does
Protects the environment.
that protects the environment. My suggestion would be if we could employ a company that would do it, that has environmental ethics.
Yeah, we could look at the. I get a sense that you don't have an idea as well. Prior to coming to this, and neither have we. We don't know that.